Everybody, Nick here, and today I want to do a little bit of cutjack comparison for you. Steel Will has done something very interesting and frankly that I'm not a big fan of by calling two very different knives the same thing. These knives are both the Steel Will Cutjack, but they are two very, very different versions. Putting aside the fact that this is the 3-inch model and this is the 3.5, you can get either version in either size. This on top here is the M390 version. We're using M390 steel, G10, and bearings, whereas this guy is the D2 version using D2 steel, FRN scales, fiberglass reinforced nylon, and washers. But they have a bunch of different contrasts between them, and I'd like to talk a little bit about why you might choose one over the other. You see, there are four main elements of this contrast that you want to think about. One of them is the handle change. Maybe it's the most obvious. When you go to the M390, you move from this FRN, fiberglass reinforced nylon, to G10. And you also go from nested liners that go inside the handle to these bare liners that come all the way out to the edge. A little bit of G10 backspacer here going on still. Look, this makes the knife feel different. Absolutely. And, you know, you've gone to a very fine texture relative to a less fine texture over here, but they're not all that different. And in some ways, actually, I prefer the texture of the FRN one because it's a little bit smoother, whereas the G10 with this kind of very tight pattern tends to pick up on dust and gunk and whatnot. But the handle change isn't all that important. That's not a big difference here. A bigger difference is the action change. This guy is using phosphor bronze washers. It's still a flipper knife, and it still has a very good action. But this guy is using stainless steel bearings. And so the action on this guy is much more like a conventional bearing knife, and it's a much more fall shutty sort of thing. You saw how that knife fell shut, and this guy doesn't so much. You can make it fall, but look, the M390 one is a better flipper by conventional measures. That's 100%, but the thing is, using phosphor bronze makes this guy more robust in nasty conditions. So that's a win on that side. And the thing is, a flipper being on washers is a little bit more unique than one on bearings, so again, this is kind of a wash. If you really like bearing flipper action, this is the M390 one's probably where you want to go, but otherwise, about the same there. One of the biggest differences is the steel. This guy uses M390 steel. It's by Bowler, and it's the same steel chemically as CPM 20CV and CTS 204P, roughly. And they are it's a very, very high-end steel. In fact, one would argue that it could be a top-of-the-line sort of steel for many, many uses. M390 is more wear-resistant than D2 steel, meaning it will hold an edge longer, all things else equal, and it will take a nicer edge than D2 steel. It's also more stain-resistant, so it's better for wet or salty sorts of conditions. But the thing is, D2 is a very solid and pretty wear-resistant steel, 100%. This is an improvement, going from D2 to M390, but the thing is, D2 is a perfectly adequate steel for everyday carry. So I don't feel like this needs the upgrade in the same way that some other knives, for instance, the Ontario Rat 2 and OS 8 went up to D2. This is a huge jump. This is also a big jump, but it's not as important of a big jump. It's going from very good to great rather than inadequate to pretty good. So, you know, it's important, but you shouldn't put too much stock in that. It's not going to be night and day. And so unless you live in a salt marsh or something where the stainlessness comes into it, or you are finding yourself resharpening every 10 minutes in your life, you probably don't need to worry too much about that steel difference. That brings us to the final difference, and probably the biggest one, which is the price. The M390 version of this knife is $100 more than the D2 version. And the thing is, that's a lot of freaking money. You could get, this is a $40 knife, this is a $150 knife. You could get one of each size in D2 and still have enough left over to buy a Spyderco Delica or something in there. I mean, that is a huge price jump, and so that's probably the most relevant difference for a lot of people. And for me, at least, the winner of this competition is actually the D2 model, which is not what I expected, given that I'm normally a little snobby. The thing is, the M390 is a great knife, absolutely 100%, but at some level, the Cutjack, to me, feels like a great budget design, and upgrading the materials make this feel like a great budget design with upgraded materials. It's well and good, and if you love the design, but you want something higher end, it's an option for you, but I think for most people, this is not $100 better, even at in the full-size version. And putting it on bearings makes it a little bit less unique and a little bit more in the middle of the crowd. Whereas down here with the D2, you're getting a great knife with a great action and a solid steel at a really compelling price point. I mean, steel is important. It's something to keep in mind, but it's not that important, and these steels aren't that different. And so this is one of the very best, most inexpensive flippers out there. Whereas this guy, to me at least, if you put the steel aside, where it is really towards the front of the pack, it's kind of in the middle in every other way in terms of price point. So both of these are good knives, and both of them are solid choices. But for me, personally, without a doubt, I am going to take the D2, and I'm going to put that $100 towards something else pretty excellent. I hope this has been interesting, and of course, you may have different answers. Like I said, this is just my personal opinion, but that's at least how I would go. So I hope you found this interesting, that this helped you make that choice a little bit more readily. Mostly, though, I hope that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.